Close your eyes and not tomorrow, not later. Now take a slow breath and feel your body sitting in time, not in the past, not in the future. Right here, July is not just another month. July is a neurological reset, a cellular checkpoint, a moment where your body asks one question: who are you becoming now? Because every morning before the world touches you, before the phone lights up, before the stress enters your bloodstream, you make a decision, and that decision becomes chemistry. What you eat is not food, it is information. It is a signal sent directly to your brain, to your hormones. What you eat in the first moments of your day is not nutrition. It is a neurological instruction sent into the deepest layers of your brain. Before you speak a word, before you think a conscious thought, your body is already deciding what kind of mind you will have. Breakfast is the first chemical vote you cast for the version of you that will show up. Every bite becomes a message. Every swallow becomes a command. When food enters your system, it does not ask for permission, it goes straight to work. It alters blood sugar, it alters hormones, it alters how neurons fire and how emotions rise. And most people have no idea that their thoughts are being manufactured by their breakfast. Processed foods are not neutral. Sugar is not innocent. They are fast signals that scream urgency into the nervous system. They tell the body to prepare for danger, even when nothing is wrong. Insulin rises, inflammation ignites, cortisol follows, and suddenly the mind becomes impatient, distracted, reactive. You call it mood, you call it personality, but it is chemistry rehearsing itself. A spiked body creates a fragmented mind. A fragmented mind cannot hold intention, and manifestation requires sustained coherence. When blood sugar crashes, the brain panics, and in that panic, the body searches for familiarity, familiar thoughts, familiar emotions, familiar limitations. That is why the same doubts return. That is why the same fears feel automatic. You think you are choosing thoughts, but your biology is choosing for you. Highly processed breakfasts train the brain to seek stimulation instead of presence. They wire reward pathways to instant gratification. They weaken the prefrontal cortex, where focus, discipline, and vision live. And when that part of the brain goes offline, the subconscious runs the show. Old programs, old habits, old emotional loops. This is not failure. This is conditioning. Sugar hijacks dopamine. It teaches the brain that pleasure comes fast and disappears faster. So the mind learns to chase, to scroll, to snack, to react. Instead of creating, instead of sustaining attention long enough for a new reality to form, a nervous system addicted to spikes cannot rest in the present moment. And the present moment is the only place where change happens. When your breakfast keeps you oscillating between highs and crashes, your inner state becomes unpredictable, and an unpredictable inner state sends a weak signal to life. The body is always listening. It is always asking, am I safe or am I surviving? Processed foods answer that question with stress. They are stripped of life, stripped of coherence, stripped of the natural intelligence that living foods carry, so the body compensates. It works harder. It ages faster. It stores fat as protection. And you wonder why energy feels blocked. You wonder why focus is inconsistent. You wonder why motivation fades by mid-morning. But the body is not broken. It is responding perfectly to what it has been given. When the brain runs on unstable fuel, it cannot generate elevated emotions. Gratitude becomes difficult. Joy feels forced. Vision feels distant, because elevated states require metabolic stability. Clarity is not a mindset. It is a physiological condition. And when you begin the day with foods that stabilize blood sugar, that nourish the brain, that slow digestion and reduce inflammation, the body relaxes. A relaxed body allows the brain to observe instead of react, to choose instead of repeat. This is where awareness becomes available. This is where intention becomes real, because the brain is no longer hijacked by cravings, no longer negotiating survival, no longer searching for the next hit of energy. In that state, thoughts become deliberate, emotions become coherent, and your internal world starts to organize itself. You stop chasing motivation because motivation arises naturally when chemistry supports clarity. You stop forcing discipline because focus becomes effortless. This is the level where manifestation stops being mystical and becomes mechanical. A stable body creates a stable signal. A stable signal creates predictable outcomes. And most people never reach this level, not because they lack belief, but because their biology is never given the chance to settle. They wake up and immediately spike themselves into stress. They flood their system with sugar and refined carbs. And then they try to meditate. They try to visualize. They try to think positively. But the body is screaming survival underneath every affirmation, and the subconscious always listens to the body more than the words. If the body feels unsafe, the mind cannot imagine expansion. It can only scan for threats. This is why the first meal matters more than most people will ever understand. It sets the tone for neural firing patterns. It shapes emotional resilience. It determines whether you live the day consciously or compulsively. And once you see this, you cannot unsee it. You realize that clarity is not something you wait for. It is something you build, molecule by molecule, decision by decision, morning by morning. The body does not need motivation. It needs regulation. And when regulation is present, the mind naturally rises into higher order thinking, into creativity, into vision, into choice. This is where the future stops being an idea and starts becoming a biological inevitability. Sugar and processed foods do more than affect the body in the moment they anchor consciousness to what has already happened. They train the nervous system to live backward instead of forward. Every spike in blood sugar is not just a metabolic event, it is a memory trigger, because the body remembers every time it survived on chaos. Every crash pulls the mind into familiarity, and familiarity feels like safety, even when it is pain. When sugar enters the bloodstream too fast, the brain lights up with urgency, dopamine surges, insulin floods, and for a brief moment, the body feels relief, but the relief is not peace, it is sedation. And when that chemical high fades, the body does not search for the future, it searches for what it already knows: old emotions, old reactions, old identities. This is how the past stays alive without you ever thinking about it. Processed foods are engineered to bypass awareness. They remove chewing time, they remove digestion effort, they remove the pause where consciousness could intervene, and the body learns to consume without presence. When you eat unconsciously, you live unconsciously. The same mechanism applies to thought. The brain trained on ultra-processed inputs becomes impatient with stillness. Silence feels uncomfortable, presence feels empty. So the mind fills the space with recycled thoughts, worries that feel productive, memories that feel important, stories that feel real, but they are not new. They are rehearsed, and rehearsal strengthens neural circuits. The more often a circuit fires, the more automatic it becomes. Sugar reinforces the circuits of immediacy, of reward now, consequence later, and that pattern bleeds into every area of life. You react faster than you reflect. You crave instead of choose. You repeat instead of create. This is not a character flaw. It is trained physiology. Blood sugar instability creates emotional instability. Emotional instability creates identity instability. And when identity is unstable, the mind clings to the past for reference, because the past is known, the future is unknown, and a body under stress avoids the unknown at all costs. Every time you spike and crash, you are teaching your nervous system that life is unpredictable, that safety is temporary, that calm does not last. So the body stays alert, hypervigilant, scanning, and in that state, imagination collapses, because imagination requires safety. It requires excess energy. It requires a body that is not bracing for impact. This is why people say they want change but feel exhausted by the idea of it. Their biology associates change with threat. Sugar keeps the stress response cycling. Cortisol rises not because life is dangerous, but because the chemistry says it is. And cortisol strengthens memory recall, but not future vision. It sharpens the past. It keeps old images vivid, old emotions accessible, old pain ready to activate. So a person wakes up, eats sugar, and by mid-morning they are emotionally time-traveling, reliving conversations, replaying mistakes, anticipating problems that never arrive. They believe they are thinking, but they are remembering. Processed foods lock the gut in inflammation, and the gut communicates directly with the brain. When the gut is inflamed, the brain receives signals of threat. This alters mood before thought ever forms. An anxious gut produces an anxious mind. A dysregulated gut produces impulsive decisions, and those decisions reinforce the same life patterns. The past survives through the body, not the mind. That is why logic fails. That is why willpower breaks. That is why affirmations bounce off. You cannot think your way out of a state your body keeps rehearsing. Sugar teaches the brain to associate comfort with stimulation. So when stillness arrives, it feels wrong. When peace arrives, it feels empty, and the mind reaches for distraction, for drama, for consumption. This is how the past disguises itself as preference, as personality, as taste. You say you just like certain foods, but your nervous system is attached to the chemical state they produce. Letting go of sugar feels like letting go of identity, because the body fears losing the only rhythm it knows. Even if that rhythm is chaos, every crash after sugar reinforces helplessness, energy drops, focus disappears, and the subconscious draws a conclusion. This is just how I am. This is just how life feels. That belief is not philosophical, it is metabolic, and beliefs built on biology feel unshakable until the biology changes. When blood sugar stabilizes, the emotional volume lowers, the mind stops shouting, space appears, and in that space, the future can finally enter. But as long as sugar runs the system, the future feels distant, unreal, unsafe, because the body has not been trained to stay regulated long enough to hold a new vision. Processed foods keep the nervous system oscillating. High stimulation followed by depletion. This oscillation becomes addictive, not because it feels good, but because it feels familiar, and familiarity equals safety to the survival brain. So even suffering becomes preferred over the unknown calm. This is why people self-sabotage progress. They return to old foods after breakthroughs, because the body is uncomfortable without its usual chemical drama. The past does not let go easily. It hides in cravings, in habits, in justifications. But the truth is simple. As long as your chemistry keeps recreating yesterday, your consciousness will keep waking up there. Freedom is not mental, it is biological. And the moment the body is no longer fed the chemicals of the past, it begins to loosen its grip. The mind slows, the emotions soften, and suddenly the future does not feel threatening. It feels possible. July is not just a change in calendar, it is a biological doorway the body recognizes whether the mind believes it or not, because seasons shift, light exposure changes, circadian rhythms adjust, and the nervous system quietly prepares for a reset long before consciousness catches up. This is why July feels different, heavier, with heat, lighter, with possibility a month where the body is more willing to release what it has been holding and more receptive to new patterns if you know how to meet it. The body is always updating based on environment, and July sends a signal of expansion, longer days, more light, more stimulation. And with that signal comes an opportunity. Either you rise with it or you resist it. And resistance always shows up as fatigue, irritability, and craving because the body is trying to recalibrate while the mind keeps repeating old commands. July becomes powerful when you understand that reset is not an idea, it is a physiological event. When you stabilize, your nutrition, stabilize your sleep, stabilize your mornings, the nervous system begins to trust again. Trust that energy will be available. Trust that stress does not need to be constant. Trust that survival can finally stand down. And when the body feels that safety, it releases stored tension held in muscles, held in organs, held in identity. This is where emotional clarity appears, not because you forced positivity, but because the background noise quiets down. A regulated body no longer wastes energy managing chaos, so that energy becomes available for perception, awareness, and intention. You start noticing things again, subtle shifts, intuitive signals, inner nudges that were always there but drowned out by inflammation and stress. Clarity is not something you chase, it is something that emerges when interference is removed. July supports this because warmth increases blood flow, light improves serotonin rhythms, and consistency trains the brain to expect order. And when the brain expects order, it stops scanning for danger, and when it stops scanning, it can finally imagine something new. Manifestation requires this state because manifestation is not about wanting, it is about signaling a stable future through consistent internal states. A dysregulated body sends mixed signals, hope one moment, fear the next, and the field responds with inconsistency. A regulated body sends coherence, and coherence is persuasive. Life responds to what is steady, not what is desperate. July gives you momentum because it is energetically forward-moving, growth-oriented, but only if your biology is aligned with that direction. When you wake up grounded, fueled, calmly alert, the mind naturally shifts toward planning instead of worrying, toward creating instead of coping. Emotional clarity follows blood sugar stability because the brain is no longer negotiating survival. With every hour, emotions become informative instead of overwhelming. You can feel without being flooded, think without spiraling, decide without second guessing. This is not discipline. This is regulation, and regulation is the foundation of power. When the body is regulated, the signal you broadcast becomes clean intentions. Feel simple, not dramatic desires. Feel natural, not obsessive. You stop asking when will it happen and start behaving like it already has because the body believes it. And belief is not a thought. Belief is a state. July is where states are easier to change because the environment supports forward movement. People underestimate this and try to force change in January when the body is conserving, not expanding. July invites participation, movement, hydration, nourishment, rhythm. When you align with that invitation, you amplify results. Manifestation becomes less about visualization and more about embodiment. You do not imagine the future, you metabolize it through daily choices. Your posture changes, your breathing deepens, your reactions soften, and those micro shifts compound. Identity begins to update quietly. are not trying to be someone new. You are no longer feeding the patterns of someone old. Destiny responds to identity, not desire, and identity is built from repeated internal states. A calm, focused, energized body repeats the state of someone who expects progress, and expectation shapes perception. You start noticing opportunities, conversations, ideas, because your nervous system is not overwhelmed by noise. Clarity sharpens discernment. You say no without guilt, yes without fear, because your system can tolerate choice. This is how July becomes a reset point, not through grand declarations, but through consistent regulation that tells the body life is stable enough to expand. And when expansion feels safe, creativity ignites. You think bigger. Without strain, you envision longer timelines without panic. The future no longer feels like a threat. It feels like a continuation of the present. And that is the secret. Manifestation happens when the future feels familiar to the body, not exciting to the mind. A regulated body makes tomorrow feel predictable in the best way, safe, supportive possible. And from that place, action becomes aligned, not rushed, not forced. Each decision reinforces the next, building momentum that feels organic. July rewards this because momentum matches its energy, movement, heat growth. When you miss this window, the body still tries to push forward, but the mind drags old weight, and that friction feels like burnout. But when you move with it, nourishment, routine, clarity, intention, the friction disappears, effort drops, outcomes increase, and you begin to trust yourself again. Trust that when you choose consistency, life responds. Trust that when you care for the body, the mind shows up. Trust that the future does not need to be chased. It needs to be prepared for internally. July is the month where preparation pays off faster because the environment cooperates, the nervous system adapts quicker, and identity loosens its grip. This is why small changes feel bigger. Now, why? Clarity arrives suddenly. Why motivation feels cleaner? The body is ready if you let it, and when you meet readiness with regulation, you cross a threshold without realizing it. One day you wake up and the old cravings are quieter. The old doubts feel distant. The old urgency is gone, and what replaces it is a steady confidence that does not need proof because it is built into your chemistry. And from that place, everything you intend carries more weight because it is not spoken from hope but from alignment.